Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to crack open a fascinating scientific experiment where biology and economics totally collide. We're going to get right to the heart of a really fundamental question about who we are.
So let's just dive in. Is trust something you consciously choose to do, or is it maybe just a chemical reaction happening in your brain? We're going to explore a landmark experiment that tested a wild idea. Could a single hormone actually make you trust a complete stranger with your own money?
Okay, so the main character in our story today is a hormone called oxytocin. You've probably heard of it, right? It gets called the love hormone or the cuddle chemical. And researchers, well, they had this big hunch that it might just be the biological key to understanding trust. But to test this theory, they couldn't just walk up to people and ask, "Hey, do you feel more trusting right now?" That's not good science. They needed an objective way to measure it. So they set up this perfectly controlled environment, an economic scenario known as the trust game. Here's how the game works. It's pretty simple. You've got two players who are totally anonymous to each other, an investor and a trustee. They both start with a little cash. The investor then has to decide how much of their money, if any, to send over to the trustee. And here's the kicker. Whatever amount they send gets tripled by the experimenter. That creates a much bigger pot of money. Then it's all up to the trustee to decide how much of that bigger pot, if any, to send back.
And this right here is the absolute key to the whole experiment. The amount of money the investor sends, that's not just cash. That's a clean, quantifiable, objective measure of trust. I mean, think about it. They're taking a real financial risk, betting that this total stranger on the other end is going to be fair and share the profits. It's a brilliant way to measure something as normally fuzzy as trust.
Okay, so the rules are set, the game is ready. Now the researchers could finally get to the core of their investigation and put oxytocin to the ultimate test. So what they did was, they brought in a bunch of people to play the role of the investor. They split them into two groups. Half of them got a nasal spray with the real deal in it, oxytocin. The other half, that was the control group, they got a placebo. It was just a simple saltwater spray that did nothing. And of course, neither group had any idea which one they'd received. And the results were, wow, they were remarkable. The investors who got a dose of oxytocin sent, on average, 17% more money to their partners than the investors who just got the saltwater spray. The hormone really seemed to be working.
But the difference gets even more stark when you look at the most trusting players. A staggering 45% of the investors in that oxytocin group showed the absolute maximum level of trust. They sent their entire stash, all 12 monetary units, over to the trustee.
And to really put that in perspective, 45% is more than double the rate of the placebo group. In that group, only 21% of investors were willing to go all in. This wasn't a small difference. This was a massive, statistically significant shift in behavior.
So it really looked like an open and shut case, right? Oxytocin makes people more trusting? End of story. But, any good scientific investigation has to consider the alternative explanations.
And this led them to a critical question. Was oxytocin actually promoting trust in another person? Or did it just, lower people's inhibitions and make them more willing to take any kind of financial risk, like a gambler at a casino who's suddenly feeling lucky?
This was the central challenge for the researchers. They had to figure out if oxytocin was causing a social effect, something specific to human interaction, or if it was just a general effect on a person's appetite for risk. You see, being able to tell those two possibilities apart was absolutely essential.
So, to find their final clue and solve this puzzle once and for all, the researchers designed an absolutely brilliant control experiment.
They ran the exact same game, but with one crucial change. This time, the investors weren't sending their money to another person. They were sending it to a computer, which would generate a return based on a random probability. The financial risk was identical, but that social element, that was completely gone.
And what happened in this version of the experiment? Well, the oxytocin effect completely disappeared. Vanished. There was no longer any significant difference in the amount of money sent by the oxytocin group and the placebo group. They behaved almost identically.
This was the clincher. This was the smoking gun. The financial gamble was the same, but the human element, that social trust component, was taken out of the equation. And as soon as that happened, oxytocin had no impact at all on the investors' decisions.
So with all the evidence in, the experiment could finally deliver its verdict on the power of this tiny little hormone.
And the conclusion was crystal clear. Oxytocin doesn't just make you a general risk taker. Its effect is highly specific. It promotes a willingness to accept social risks, the kinds of risks that come from interacting with other people. It is, in essence, the molecule of human trust.
You know, this experiment is a landmark study in this really cool field called neuroeconomics. It's a field that seeks to understand the biological machinery, the actual brain systems and chemicals that underlies all of our economic choices. It shows our decisions aren't just about rational calculation, they have really deep biological roots.
And that leaves us with a final and pretty provocative thought. If a behavior as complex and as fundamentally human as trust can be influenced by a simple chemical, what does that really mean for our understanding of society, of cooperation, of even economics itself? I mean, understanding the biology of our better angels could be the key to building a more trusting world.